What's up everybody and welcome back. In this video I'm going to be reviewing the Satechi USB-C Multiport Pro and find out if this dongle will let me replace my laptop with my iPad while I'm traveling. So recently I took a trip back home to visit family and go to a wedding. So I thought this was a perfect opportunity to ditch my laptop and see if I could do everything on my iPad. Since it was a family trip, I didn't have any big projects planned. I was probably just gonna take some photos with my dad and maybe shoot some video. So I thought of this like a day before we were gonna leave. So I just headed down to the Apple store to see which dongle they had and if they had multiple options, and then I was just gonna purchase one and test it out. So this is the one they actually had, the only one they had actually in stock, and it's only sold at Apple stores, so you can't get this anywhere else. So in the store, I asked a couple people that worked there if they had ever used this one, and they hadn't. And so I looked up a couple reviews, and the only reviews online that I could find were on the Apple website, and a ton of them were good and a ton of them were bad. There's no in the middle. There's more good than bad, so I just decided to go with it and test it out. And the price on this is, it actually says $69.95 on the box, but it rang up $64.95. So I feel like that's a pretty average price for the dongles that are available right now. Some of them a little bit more expensive, some a little bit cheaper than this one, so this one's kind of middle of the road. So initially when I pulled it out of the box, some of my thoughts were it feels very high quality aluminum. It feels like an Apple product. The space gray almost matches the iPad, and it's just lightweight and small. So I like that about it. So the hub itself has 5 different ports. It has a 4K HDMI cable, an SD card reader, a micro SD card reader, USB-A, and a USB-C PD, which is power delivery, which I actually didn't realize when I purchased this. So you can't transfer data, and I think that's a huge downfall of this one. It also doesn't have a headphone jack on it, which really doesn't bug me. I haven't used wired headphones for a couple of years now. I know that is important to some people, but it really doesn't fit into my workflow. I prefer wireless headphones, and I don't miss it. The past couple of years, I really don't care if anything doesn't include a headphone jack anymore. I do know some people do need that, but me personally, I don't. One thing I did notice right when I did plug this into my iPad, I don't like the cord. It might get more flexible as you use it, but it's really stiff, and so once a couple things are plugged into it, it sits at weird angles. It also is very long once you plug in an external drive, because you have that cord coming out as well, so it just looks super messy on a desk. I prefer minimalist style gear in everything, and so when I have this huge mess of things on the desk, I don't like it. So when I purchased this, I initially didn't know which one I preferred, the one that plugs into the iPad or the one with the cord. I do now think I prefer the one that plugs in to the iPad, although I haven't tested it out, so I'd like to test one of those out to see if I prefer that more. So the first thing I tested out was the USB-C power delivery, and it worked great with just a normal charger, and it worked with my Morphe power bank, but I had a Sony one that I couldn't get it to work with. I don't know why. The power bank beeped, and I've never heard it beep before, and it just flashed, and so it actually wouldn't transfer power. So I didn't end up actually testing out the HDMI cable. I don't really have any use for that currently. I really wanted to get this dongle to transfer files from my SD card onto an external storage drive and be able to edit videos or edit photos with my iPad. So I didn't test that out. So like I said, when it comes down to it, all I cared about was transferring the files and the speed. So the first test I did with this was I was in the Black Hills. I shot some 4K footage with my Macbook Pro 2, and when I got home, plugged this into my iPad, plugged the SD card and the USB external drive in, and started transferring the files over. And I waited about 40 minutes or so, and it was still spinning, so I decided to cancel it because I got tired of waiting. I wanted to see how many files were actually on the hard drive. So I canceled it, and there was only 4 files on there. Granted, those files were pretty big. Those 4 files were, I think, about 6 gigabytes, but 40 minutes for 6 gigabytes was a waste of time for me. I'm not going to wait around for that. Really, those speeds, I would have to like plug it in overnight and leave it all night long, which I didn't want to do. So I decided I would wait until I got home to test this out. So I decided to compare the speeds against the MacBook that I currently have, which is a mid-2015 MacBook Pro. So I shot a 3-minute clip with my Sony a7 III in 4K at 30 frames a second for 3 minutes. The file ended up being about 2.2 gigabytes. First, I started with my MacBook Pro. I have a Sony SD XC2 64 gigabyte card, and the read speed is 260 megabytes per second, and the write speed is 100 megabytes per second. So like I said, I started out with my MacBook Pro with that 2.2 gigabyte file, transferring it to my external hard drive, which is a Seagate Slim 2 terabyte hard drive. And initially it took 27.21 seconds. And keep in mind, there was something I didn't mention, that I am running iPad OS, so I can access the files, which is very helpful, but that should be out in the next couple weeks. The iPhone event is on September 10th, and so we should be seeing the public version of iPad OS. So next, I plugged in my external hard drive and the SD card and transferred that file from the SD card to the external hard drive, and it took 24 minutes and 13 seconds, which was insane. It went from 27 seconds on my MacBook to 24 minutes on my iPad, which I was like, this is ridiculous. I don't think this is gonna work for me because I can't wait that long. I'm not super patient. If I get some pictures and get home and have a full card while I'm traveling, I wanna transfer those over to my iPad and be able to go out in like a few hours after that. I'm not gonna wait all night long for those files to transfer. But I did realize that the drive that I was using was almost completely full. There's only about 3 gigabytes of space left on it, which accounts for why it was really slow. So I actually got a fresh drive, the same exact drive, and then tried it again. And then it drastically cut the time down on the new drive. So it was 6 minutes and 36 seconds. Still very slow compared to the MacBook. So it did help, but 6 minutes is still a long time. So keep in mind that's on a very fresh drive. There wasn't any files on it, so that drive is gonna slow down over time. So then I got to thinking, I wonder how fast it would be if I just took the data from the card onto the iPad, which was actually way faster again. That only took 40 seconds. So that greatly reduced the time. So if you're transferring files from SD card to the iPad itself, and I tested with iCloud as well as just onto the iPad, and they're both about the same. They're around 40 seconds long. So that's a pretty good option. So next I tested the Apple SD card reader, which is a USB-C to SD card reader, and it was actually way faster. It took about 26.53 seconds, so it was actually faster than the MacBook speeds, but keep in mind I was using that full drive. If I used the empty drive, probably would have been a little bit faster, but this was faster than the Satechi. So next I wanted to test to see how fast it would be to take a file and put it on the external hard drive, which is a USB-A, and that took about the same amount of time. It was 6 minutes and 36 seconds. So anything transferring to the external, the USB-A hub, takes a pretty fair amount of time to transfer those files, which is really what I'm trying to do. I want to have those on an external drive because my iPad is only 64 gig. One interesting thing to note, going from the external drive to the iPad was actually really fast. So it was 30 seconds to drag that same file from the external hard drive to the iPad itself. So really, you get some pretty good speeds if you're transferring anything to the iPad, but once you try to transfer anything to the USB-A external drive, it ends up taking quite a bit of time. And then just a couple other things to note, I did have some trouble sometimes it recognizing the SD card. I'd had to plug it in and unplug it quite a few times. The iPad always recognized it when I plugged in the actual port, the multi-port itself. But when I plugged the things into the actual port, sometimes it had a hard time recognizing those. And so overall, would I recommend the Satechi USB-C Multiport Pro? Not for me personally. I don't think this workflow is going to work out for me with those speeds. I would like something a lot faster. that matches, 40 some seconds of file, so that I can transfer those files pretty quickly. I think I'm going to return this. I think the best option for me currently is to just use the Apple Card reader that I already have, transfer it to my iCloud because I have 2 terabytes of storage in my iCloud, and then buy a USB-C external hard drive and then transfer those files back onto the external USB-C drive. That's the next thing I'm going to test, and if you guys would like to see that review, let me know in the comments, or let me know if you have tried some other ports like the hyperdrive or any other port that uses a USB-C that transfers data, to see if that's faster. But that's it for this one, guys. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned for the next one. Like and subscribe if you want to continue to see videos like this one. Bye.